Hey, welcome to another episode of Behind the Picture with your friendly neighborhood host. I am Cardi. When we're on the road to becoming a household name as a photographer, it's really hard to know what sessions that are going to be the ones that, if the right person sees, it could actually change your career forever. Today, we're going to get into my most career changing sessions, how they happened, what I did in order to assure that that work was going to be looked at for years to come. I'm also going to dive into the small things that each one of you could be doing in a session to make sure that you're memorable, to make sure that you're remembered, and to assure that you're going to get called back by the client. So, you guys might have seen one of my videos where I talk about the best advice that nobody listens to. One of the things I talked about during that is, hey guys, welcome, by the way. Welcome if you're watching live. I appreciate you too. You guys are always here and so dedicated. Let's go, baby. Appreciate you. So, one of the things that I talked about in that video is classic and timeless, and how classic and timeless last forever. When you're following trends and when you're chasing what's happening right now in the minute, it makes it really hard to go back and look at that work a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. My God, if you're shooting fashion, here's an example. All you got to do is look back at your pictures of yourself in high school. See how you dressed, see how your hair was, see how your style was in high school versus now. That tells you how fashion dates photographs. So when I shifted my headspace into being a portrait photographer, what my style kind of turned into was classic and timeless. And because I aimed for a classic and timeless style, I can look back at my work today and actually look at it again, you know? So today we're going to get into my 3 most important sessions. We're going to start with, in 1997, I photographed Thom Yorke from Radiohead. Now, Thom Yorke from Radiohead, this was 1 week before OK Computer. And you have to imagine, OK Computer ended up going on to win 5 Grammys. And the way that I got this session is so absolutely insane. I was shooting for the Globe and Mail newspaper, and I had been shooting for the Globe and Mail for about a year. And the funny thing is that I started as a fashion photographer. My only goal when I started making photographs was to be a fashion photographer. My goal was to shoot models. So if you look at my fashion photography, and if you look at my earlier, we're going to just zoom by some of this. If you look at my fashion photography, this was my love. This was my passion. This is what brought me to pictures, was being a photographer that shot for Vogue. That was always my goal, was to be a fashion shooter. And the thing that I found so strange was the first time I went to the Globe and Mail newspaper, the art director gave me not a fashion session to do, he gave me a portrait. And I got to tell you, this is the best advice that I was ever given as a photographer. When I delivered that first portrait that he gave me, and I'm like, hey, Michael, you know I'm a fashion photographer, right? And he said, Cardi, any hack with a camera can take pictures of beautiful girls in beautiful situations with beautiful hair, makeup, clothes, styling. It takes a real photographer to shoot the rest of us. What kind of a photographer are you? And that really hit me. It hit me so hard, like, wow, what kind of a photographer am I? Am I one of those guys that's just interested in shooting beautiful people with beautiful hair, makeup, styling? What about the rest of the people? And then I started thinking about, let's start thinking about the most memorable images ever in life. I'm going to show you some of the most memorable portraits that I know as a photographer. Let's talk about this picture right here, which is Yusuf Karsh photographs Winston Churchill in 1945. This picture literally ended the war. This photograph happened literally 70, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Like, this is one of the most powerful portraits that have ever been made in our generation, and it's a portrait. Let's talk about Whoopi Goldberg in the milk. This is the most powerful portrait. Like, oh my God, Whoopi Goldberg in the milk, photographed by Annie Leibovitz, when Annie Leibovitz was the chief photographer for Rolling Stone magazine. Like, let's talk about how actually powerful portraits are. Like, it's actually insane when you think about how powerful the portrait is. Let's talk about, oh my God. Let's talk about this photograph. Oops. This picture is just another, oh my goodness. This photograph is another one of the most powerful portraits of our generation. John Lennon and Yoko Ono on the bed, photographed by Annie Leibovitz literally the day before John Lennon was murdered. Another portrait. Another absolutely powerful portrait that you just can't forget about. So when we get to that place with our photography and we're thinking about, like, what type of photography can I make that will actually change lives, change people's perspectives about us. And for me, that first session was Thom Yorke from Radiohead. And I got to tell you how I got it. It was so insane because that art director that had given me the assignment that said, any hack with the camera can shoot pretty people, takes a real photographer to shoot the rest of us. That art director had left. And there was now a new art director, and she didn't know any of the photographers and what they shot and what they were best at. And I had just shot an assignment for the Globe and Mail, and I was dropping that assignment off. And for those of you, where's my mouse? There it is. For those of you that are a little bit older, you'll remember this celebrity because this one was a huge one. This celebrity was Phil Collins, and I was delivering this photograph of Phil Collins to the new art director because that was my most recent assignment. So I passed this picture to her of Phil Collins, and she grabbed it. She's like, wow, Phil Collins. Wow, that's great. That's great. Okay, cool. And she was just, and she's like, oh, she grabbed a piece of paper and she's like, do you know who Radiohead is? And I looked at her and I said, I do. She's like, do you want to take pictures of them or him or whatever? And I said, I do. And I went off and ended up photographing the most important session of my career, which photographing Thom Yorke was something that to this day, I remember the story like it was yesterday. I was meeting them at the Sheraton Center Hotel in Toronto. I get there. The writer is speaking to one person, and that person is Thom Yorke. I find out that the entire band was sick except for Thom, and he was doing all the press for the day. Okay. I listened to the interview. One thing I realized when I shoot editorially is to always shoot after the interview. Don't shoot first, shoot second. Wait for the interview, because during the interview, you actually learn so much about the subject that you're about to shoot. You get to hear them talk. You get to hear the nuances. And because you're in the room while that interview's happening, that subject starts to like feel your vibes, feel your energy. And that's what happened with Thom. He was sitting on the couch drinking tea because he was trying to not get sick. The rest of the band was sick. And after the interview, he's like, "Hey, mate, are you taking the photo?" And I said, "I am." And he said this, "What's the idea?" And I had an idea to shoot the four of them on the bed, on a queen size bed, and stand on the bed and aim down and shoot the four of them. But because it was just Thom, he's like, "I don't want to look like some wanker in a hotel room. Is it cool if we went outside?" And when I was walking into the location, I did this without an assistant. I actually saw that there was like a cool spot that if he agreed, that was going to be the place that I took him for this photo. And he said, "Yeah, like, let's go outside." So I remember standing in the elevator with him. I remember what he was wearing. I remember his super baggy pants and how he had his arms crossed. And it was like, I don't know whether it was his first time in Canada, but we got outside. I dropped my bag. I said, "Can you sit right there?" I'm going to make a video, by the way, and actually show you guys this exact location and walk you through this story in a video format that'll be a little bit more visually. Leave a comment if you want me to make that video. I think that's the one I'm going to make next. So I say like, "Hey, Thom, post up right there." And he sits and I shoot a Polaroid. And that Polaroid, he asks me, "Can I see it?" And I pass the Polaroid to him. It's a black and white Polaroid. And he says, "Yo, that's dope. Can I keep it?" And I thought that that was so amazing that he wanted to keep my Polaroid, and he put it right here in his pocket of this jean jacket. And right at that moment, I shot this picture. And you can see it's like at that time, this was one of the only pictures of Thom Yorke smiling. Like, he just didn't smile for photos. And this was one of those photos that like I got him to smile for. Sorry, guys, I didn't start ATEM today. Let me do that now. So that's the thing that allows you guys to control my stream. So this is Thom Yorke after my first frame. And he's feeling it, and he's feeling me, and I get this photo. After this photo, I get this photo. And this photo becomes the photo. This is Thom Yorke from Radiohead 1 week before OK Computer. My Polaroid is in this pocket, and it's the Polaroid, he has it. And I have more to this story, but the thing that was just amazing is the fact that he wanted my Polaroid. He kept my Polaroid, and it was like just such an honor. So I deliver this picture to the Globe and Mail. I give them the contact sheets. They say the photos that they want to use. And the photograph goes on the cover of the Globe and Mail newspaper. And literally the art section of the Globe and Mail newspaper on a Saturday back in 1997, about 2.2 million people saw the newspaper that Saturday. About 2.2 million people saw a photo by Steve Carty. So a few weeks later, I have this picture in my portfolio and I'm going to Universal Music to show my portfolio, and I'm showing my book to some other record companies, and people are seeing in my portfolio and they're literally saying, is that Thom Yorke? And I am like, yeah. And it really, I had no idea that having a photograph of a celebrity, of a star, of a superstar that was at the forefront of everybody's lips at that time would make such a huge difference. But what I did with Thom during that, thank you, appreciate the good vibes. What I did with Thom during that time is we connected. Like, we were talking in the elevator, we were talking as I shot his photos. I talked to him about being photographed by Albert Watson, and he asked me, like, how did you know that I was photographed by Albert Watson? Let me find this photo. And I said, when I heard that I was getting to photograph the same band that sang Creep, sorry, let me just search this Watson photo. Once I had found out that I was photographing the same cat that had photographed, oh my God, Albert Watson had shot him. Thom Yorke by Albert Watson. Come on now. Why can't I find this photograph? So strange. Anyways, I really, I'm not sure why I can't find this photo. Thom Yorke by Albert Watson. It's black and white, but very, very, very tricky. Yeah, please somebody find that photo, Thom Yorke by Albert Watson. I don't know if it's on his website. So I talked with him about being photographed by Albert Watson, and I had moments, and the fact that I had done research, he thought that that was really cool, that I knew who he was, and that, you know, he's in a whole other country. I knew who he was, and I knew who he'd been photographed before, and like, I took photography really seriously, and he was really into that. And this is where the story gets weird. A year later, I'm going to try to do this fast, but a year later, I'm on Queen Street with my roommate, walking with my dog, and I feel a tap on my shoulder. I look behind. It's Thom Yorke from Radiohead. And he's like, yo, aren't you that dread that took my picture last year? I had dreads at that time. And I said, yes, I am. How'd you recognize me from behind? And he also said, can you help me with these girls? And there was like 60 girls, like 20 feet behind, following him quietly, politely, because they're Canadian. And I said, yes. And then he said, do you know where Rotate This is, which is a record store here? And I'm like, absolutely. So can you take me there? So walked him to Rotate This, talked about the photo shoot. He asked me, will I ever get to see that photograph that you made of me last year? And I said, absolutely. He's like, can you bring it to me? I said, absolutely. He said, I'm checked in at the Harbor Castle Westin under James Bond. I said, that's amazing. So dropped him off at Rotate This, went home, found the print, jumped in my car. Within like an hour, I drive down to the Harbor Castle Westin, only to find out that James Bond checked out 10 minutes ago. The lady's like, James Bond checked out 5 minutes ago. Oh my God. So I call my roommate, disappointed, saying I just missed him. He's like, I'm watching Much Music right now. It says intimate and interactive with Radiohead coming up in 10 minutes. I'm like, oh my God. I wheel the car around, drive to Much Music, just in time for this intimate and interactive to start. And I see Thom and the boys walk on. I wait for an hour with this envelope for this intimate and interactive to be over. Then I wait for another half an hour for them to leave Much Music and go into the parking lot. And there's like thousands of girls screaming. And I wait for like a little lapse in the screams. And I say, hey, Thom. And Thom looks and is like, yo, let that dread guy through. Security lets me through. I pass him the envelope. He takes the envelope, shakes my hand. He jumps in the limo. The limo passes through the gates, drives onto the street. I kind of run through the gates. I look down the street to see. I can see him through the little window because it wasn't tinted for some reason. He reaches in, pulls the picture, and looks back and is like, fucking A, mate. So he actually saw the picture, has the photo, and that's how I completed the circle with Thom Yorke. And he remembered me, which is insane. And it goes to say how important it is to be memorable as a photographer when you have experiences with people. This is something that's super crucial to know. Anyone can make the photograph. Anyone can make the photograph. So the fact that you've been chosen to make the photograph, or you've won the job, or you got that opportunity to do that photo shoot, not only do you have to make amazing photographs, but you also actually have to be memorable. And you do that by creating endorphins with your subject. We create these endorphins with compliments. We create them with like making that subject feel good, feel something. And you can also create negative endorphins by being anxious, by being bad vibes, by being short, by any of those things also release endorphins, but in a negative way. So my goal is to release positive endorphins whenever I'm shooting with somebody. And what that does is it gives them little dopamine hits. And those dopamine hits release this feeling, and that feeling creates memories. And when you're attached to a positive memory like that, and there's a photograph as the result attached to that positive memory, people remember you forever. They become your evangelist. And that's what I've been doing as a photographer as long as I can remember. It's a big secret that I'm passing across to you today, but know that we can all do it. We can all create evangelists just by being someone who's not just a very capable, very technically savvy, very great photographer. We can do that by just being good vibes, by just being complimentary, by just making people feel good. Oh my God, I love that sweater. Where'd you get that? Holy shit, did you get a haircut for this? That's super dope. Without being patronizing, being genuine, like actually being interested, like really interested in the person that you're shooting. That's a great way to really make sure, like, it makes them feel super special. Subjects are already really nervous about being in front of your camera. So the more that you can embrace them with a hug, like if you're nervous as well, that nervousness just transfers over to your subject. Now you're both nervous. But the way that I describe it, even if you are nervous, that nervous feeling shouldn't be taken as something for you to pull back from. Like, you should lean into your nervousness, like lean into it, use it as like a positive energy, and know that that nervousness that you're feeling is the excitement of the possibility of something magic happening, something that's going to make you as a photographer memorable forever. That's what that nervousness is. So you shouldn't pull away from that nervousness. Every time we photograph, it's an opportunity for us to become a household name. We're all on the route of becoming a household name as a photographer. And how we do it is by making every session with us incredibly memorable. Let me talk about my next most important session. Oh, this one's a big one. A big one. In 2001, hip hop had broken, and I was on the forefront shooting everyone from Kanye West to Ludacris to Daft Punk, although that's not hip hop, to Ja Rule, to Pete Rock in New York City. Like, I was shooting everybody. And Jay-Z's record had just came out called Rock La Familia. Ludacris's record had just came out where Ludacris, Cadillac Grills, Cadillac, like Southern Hospitality. And there was a super producer who was making all of these albums secretly in the background. And his name was Pharrell Williams. And Pharrell was producing for the biggest acts in hip hop in secret. And finally, he decided that he was going to put together his own project and drop his own record. And that project was called NERD, Nerd. The song was called Lap Dance. And I photographed Pharrell Williams when Pharrell was in Toronto promoting the NERD record. And this is the second most important photograph session of my career. This photograph is the most jacked, the most stolen, the most reposted without credit. I'm with Getty Images. So Getty just catches anybody who tries to like jack this picture. But it's like Instagram, how many times this is jacked? And because people know that this is my photograph, people tag me. So I see it the second that it gets posted, like, hey, that's a Steve Cardi photograph. And they don't tag me, they don't mention me. But let me tell you the story as to how I photographed Pharrell Williams. I was shooting for a street level magazine that was like a hip hop magazine back in the day when there was like no hip hop magazines. There was Vibe in New York. There was The Source in New York. And funny enough, I've shot for The Source. And I've also been to do a meeting in 1996, the year before I photographed Thom Yorke in New York with Vibe magazine. I'll tell those stories another episode. But there was no hip hop magazines, but in Toronto, a few small urban magazines popped up that were promoting music and this new urban music, R&B and hip hop that was exploding on the scene. And I had a fashion photography background and portraits of people who weren't within hip hop. But I was walking down the street one day. I happened to have my portfolio, which was back then a physical book. There was no internet back then in 2001 like there was, but you had to still physically show your book. So there's no smartphones. So I popped my knapsack, I opened my book, and while I was walking down the street with this guy who was like, hey, I heard you're a photographer. I showed him my portfolio and he's like, I have this magazine. I want you to shoot for it. And I'm like, okay, what kind of a magazine? He's like, the hip hop magazine. I'm like, oh, like a rap magazine? He's like, yeah, hip hop. It's like the next. So I basically started shooting for this magazine. The first, oh my God, this camera. I don't know why this camera keeps dropping out. Yeah, that's something I need to learn because as you guys can see, I got new cameras. This is a new camera that you're looking at right now. We got a little mirrorless action. So this is new. And then this also is new. We got a little depth of field. So this camera with the capture card is cutting out. This camera without the capture card is not. So I got to figure out what's what. It seems that this cuts out every like whatever, and it's turned to not do that. Anyways, back to Pharrell. I get called and asked, do you want to shoot Pharrell Williams? And I didn't really know exactly who he was, but all the editor had to tell me was Rock La Familia, Ludacris's album, and Lap Dance. And I went back, found the Lap Dance video, and saw that he was on BMXs and doing tricks on BMXs in this Lap Dance video. And I also know that Pharrell has a skateboarding background. So I, rather than renting a studio, or I had a studio at that time, rather than shooting at the studio, I decided to meet him at a skateboard shop. Like at a skateboard shop, which is crazy because when he got there, and it's like a skateboard shop that also sells BMXs. It's like BMX, skate, snowboard. When we got there and he showed up, he's like, first thing he said was, whose idea was it to meet here? And I'm like, yo, that's me, bro. And he's like, are you the photographer? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yo, Daps, man, like, this is my vibe. Like, this is my shit. I'm like, of course, man. I do my research. And then he's like, is it cool if I walk around? And I'm like, yo, that's Pete. He's the owner. Like, yeah, man, like, fill your boots. So he walked around and he picked up this jacket, this red dub jacket. And he's like, yo, this jacket matches my outfit perfectly. I'm going to cop this jacket. How much is this jacket? And it was like 1,100. And then he said, yo, that whip right there, that chrome gold lowrider, I have that at my house. Can we do a photo with that lowrider? I'm like, absolutely. So he literally reached into his pocket and pulled out like a wad of American dollars and was just like, breaks off like 11 and puts it on the counter and says, here, that's for the jacket. And Pete, the owner of the store, was like, I was going to give that to you for free because you're Pharrell. Is like, okay. And like takes the 11 and puts it in the till and blah, blah. And we go out to make this photo. And I had this spot picked already. You can see the way that the leading line comes in here, the way that it also pushes into darkness in the background, and also just the way that he's vibing with this bike as if it's his. Like, you can see that it's like he knows this bike, but it's not his, but it is. The next thing, at this time, in 2001, these pants were the tightest pants I had ever seen. Like, from a hip hop perspective, these were skin tight. How far we've come as far as skinny pants. But Pharrell was such an innovator with his fashion and rocking the gazelles, and how the gazelles pulled off this Puma top, and then how he wanted to get this jacket. Next, the trucker cap. Nobody was rocking the trucker caps. And you can see this is an NERD trucker. And this cap became a style that like Ashton Kutcher, oh my goodness, Ashton Kutcher rocked, and so many others. Okay, let me get in, but not so far. There we go. So yes, that is the NERD cap that I'm trying to show you. So yes, Pharrell Williams. Now let's talk about the next photo. The next photo, we go to another location. And he wants to change. I have a stylist, so we have another outfit for him that has like a little bit of Canadian hits, like Canadian Leafs on it. And he loves the outfit. He's like, yo, I'm going to rock that. That's super dope. But then he sees a BMX and he's like, yo, that BMX, I don't have a 20-inch BMX. I only have a 16-inch BMX, like the little wheel ones. I don't have a fat wheel BMX. Can we use that one? And I'm like, of course. And then he asked Pete, how much is it? And Pete's like, that one, that's 1,200. So Pharrell goes back to his stack and goes 12, puts it on the counter and says, yo, and writes his address literally on a Post-it note. Here. Ship this to North Carolina. Oh, wait. He breaks off another 200. He's like, here, ship this to North Carolina. And the guy's like, okay. So Pharrell ended up buying this bike. Now, before I show you this photo, as we were he rode the bike to the next location, which was like a block down. And he was doing like 360s and like big bunny hops and like tail whips like on the sidewalk while we were riding. And I love bikes. So the fact that he was so into this bike was amazing. And again, he just bought it. So now he's riding it like it's his, which was amazing. So I get to this alley and I'm like, Pharrell, we're going to shoot right here. And what he does is he rides down to the end of the alley and he's like, yo, I'm going to do a trick. Are you going to get it? And I'm like, yo, I'm for sure going to get it. He's like, I can only do this one time. Are you going to get it? And I'm like, Pharrell, I got you. And he does this trick. which is a no-hander, no-footer on this GT 20-inch BMX. And he does it in one try, and I get this photo. This photo becomes, I'm going to get emotional. Holy shit. This photo becomes one of the most important photographs of my career. This photo goes in carte blanche. I get selected later on in my life, 5, 8, 10 years later, I get selected to be in Carte Blanche, which is the first book of Canadian contemporary photographers. And of all my, at that time, 20 years of photographs, they picked this photograph of Pharrell Williams to represent my career of photography. This photograph went into Hip Hop Immortals, which is the largest exhibit of hip hop photography in the world. This photograph was exhibited in Paris, in London, and is in the book Hip Hop Immortals. This photograph was in the exhibit 40 Years of Hip Hop. It is now 50 years of hip hop. So 10 years ago, there was an exhibit during Contact, the Scotiabank Contact Photography Festival. And this photograph was selected, as well as this photograph, to be in the 40 years of hip hop. During that exhibit, I exhibited with David LaChapelle, Danny Clinch, Jonathan Mannion, like Matt Barnes, like the heavy hitters of photography that have shot all the hip hop that you know, all the albums that you know. I exhibited with those heavy hitters here in Toronto. I've also exhibited with Jamil Shabazz. In 2009, I dropped my first coffee table book, which is called Positives. And Jamil Shabazz was very pivotal in encouraging me to drop my first coffee table book. And that was the first time I published Kanye, by the way. That Kanye photo, that is controversial, when I shot Kanye and very controversially walked away from Kanye after 3 photographs. I didn't show that photograph for 5 years until I published my first book. So Pharrell Williams was the next session that absolutely changed my career. And there is one more photo from that session, which is this one here. The leading line in this shot, and the way that you're just forced to look at him. All the lines point to him, his handlebars. Everything is bringing your eye back up to him. This triangle, it's all bringing you to this superstar. You know, like, also the unpretentious way of shooting him just like a person. There is no pose. He's just sitting there. And I adopted this classic and timeless style almost by accident. Like literally almost by accident. I didn't realize that this work that I was making was going to be stuff that... This picture is from 22 years ago. 22 years ago, this session. This session is from almost 30 years ago. 27-ish years ago. But these photographs carved a career for me. And each one of these sessions, the way that I related to my subjects, each way that I tried to find common ground, each way that I tried to put them in a situation where they could actually be themselves, I never tried to loft anybody to the level of celebrity status, because even if they have $1 billion or they have a nickel and they're homeless on the street, we're all equal. We're all humans and we all deserve the same attention. One thing that I've realized with celebrities, if you treat a celebrity like a celebrity and you go all fangirl on them and you loft them to a place where you're looking up to them, there's no respect. There's no respect. You're just another paparazzi. But if you treat them like an equal, if you ask them things about themselves that aren't, oh my God, like talk to me about this record, or about, I talked about BMXs and skateboards with Pharrell, and with Thom Yorke, I talked about photography. And the fact that we can all find common ground with our subjects, no matter how nervous a person or no matter how shy a person we are, once you find common ground with the person who's in front of you, now you have something that you can talk about. Now you have something that you can share. And it's the most important thing with any of your photography. So that brings us to the third most important session of my career. And this session is crazy because I get Googled, you know? People ask, like, how do you get hired to shoot? And it's like, I'm not a paparazzi. I'm not like showing up somewhere and like just hoping that I'm gonna see these people and then asking them like, hey, can I take your picture? No. This is all set up. I work for magazines. The magazine hires me. They talk to that person's people. Those coordinate. I get times, dates, and we go and we make the session. It's all very editorial. Like I'm not a paparazzi. And one of the reasons that I didn't show that photograph of Kanye is because it was a session where I didn't have the kind of control that I like to have when I do my sessions. So it was a bit of an ego battle. Kanye's people pushed me. Kanye's security guard pushed me. It was a whole thing. So yeah, there's way more to the story than just me walking away from Kanye West. Okay, so I'm searchable. And this is one of the things that's amazing about specializing. Because I'm a specialist, I'm searchable. And if you go to Google, or Google, I guess you guys call it. If you go to Google, I'm just saying Google, I'm just being funny. If you go to Google and search editorial portraits, Toronto, you see me right here. I'm second out of 87 million entries. Second. So that's what I shoot. And that's how people find me. Editorial portraits are portraits for magazines. And because I shoot portraits of people for magazines, and that is editorial portraits, I'm easily searchable. You can search me. You can search me without even knowing that you're searching for me. And because I come up literally first, you're going to have to click. You need to know who that guy is. And also, you see photos underneath my link. It's not just a link, because also with Google and Google My Business, you have the ability to do like, let's see, once you now know my name and you type Steve Carty, you get this little window here, which is Google My Business. And that is where you can add photographs. That's where you can have reviews. That's where you can literally make it so after you shoot for someone, they can be like, oh my God, Sonia was the best photographer ever. Like, that's where you have your reviews, because people can search you and that attaches itself to your business. If you're a photographer and don't have a Google My Business thing happening, and you're just like Google re-indexes you and like they almost index you more if you're using like a proper Google business listing. I suggest you all do that. It's free and it gives you so much insight as to what keywords people are typing in order to find your website. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the third most important session of my career. It was 2009. And after 2001, 2002, 2003, one thing that I noticed was happening was I had a lot of hip hop in my book. In fact, I had too much hip hop in my book. And if you had asked someone about Steve Cardi, they would say, "Oh, Cardi, yeah, that hip hop photographer," because I had photographed so much of that and I had niched down so narrow that that's all people knew me for, was that hip hop photographer. So I knew that I had painted myself into a corner and now I had to undo it. And the way that I was going to do that was to pull myself back and remember I didn't just shoot hip hop. I shot rock stars and I shot jazz stars like Tony Bennett and Oscar Peterson and all these other amazing people, and actors. And well, not really quite actors as much yet. Well, I had a bit. I had shot Sandra Oh from Grey's Anatomy and a couple of actors, but I realized like I needed to lean more into the area of shooting more actors and directors. Around 2005, I started getting hired by CBC to shoot the Toronto International Film Festival. And again, not paparazzi, but each day I would photograph one or two actors or directors for the newspaper. And through those jobs, I photographed Adam Agoyan, I photographed Don McKellar, I photographed so many incredible actors, directors. I photographed Charles Officer, who I went to high school with, who was doing a movie called Nurse Fighter Boy at that time, and I got hired to photograph someone I went to high school with and profile them like we were in the same class. It was so cool. So from painting myself now out of that corner, I had now started to shoot some really high profile actors. Sandra, I mean, I can show you, or you can just go to my website. I want to really just zero in on this particular session. In 2009, I got a call from Japan, funny enough, and it was a client. He spoke English, broken, and he said, what my job is I bring movies from North America to Japan 1 year after the fact, and I also bring the actor to Japan with that movie in order for them to tour and promote that movie, like once the translations are done. And who we're promoting and doing that with next is Colin Firth. And in order for us to promote that Colin Firth is coming, we need photographs of Colin Firth. He's in Toronto for the Toronto International Film Festival. He's nominated for an Oscar. Could you take his photograph? Sure. I said these 1, 2, 3 magic words. What's your budget? And I got a rate that was probably 10 times what I would have photographed Colin Firth for. So, Corey at that time, you guys know Corey Vanderploeg. Corey was my assistant at that time. And Corey and I get to the location. I set up my classic black background, one light, and the Japanese client comes in, blah, 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 bow, shake hands, da, da, da. And now we wait for Colin Firth to come in. Colin Firth comes in with an entourage. He comes in with his 2 assistants and him, or like assistant and agent or assistant and manager, blah, blah, blah. And they talk with the Japanese client. I introduce myself, blah, 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 blah. But I don't say I'm the photographer. And Colin notices that I have the iPhone 4 because it was iPhone time. It was like the second iPhone 4, because it had like the square edges. So Colin's like, is that an iPhone 4? And I'm like, yes, Colin, it is. Because I had actually lined up for it. So he's like, is that an iPhone 4? And I'm like, it is. And he's like, do you know how to get stuff onto it without plugging it into your computer? And I say, I do. You just use Dropbox. And then he says to his assistant, like, write that down. And she's like, and then how do you blah, blah, blah? I'm like, oh, we'll use Evernote. He's like, Evernote. And he write that down. And she's like writing down all these apps. And he's like, do you like it? And I'm like, oh yeah, the iPhone 4, it's amazing. It's like, it has FaceTime. And he's like, let's talk about FaceTime. And then he commands the room and he tells a story about how he had just got his phone. He had just landed in Toronto and he's in the hotel. He has to go to the washroom, take a pee. He goes and he's telling this story. He goes into the bathroom. He takes his phone because he was like reading news or something, and he sets it like on the mirror and like he's looking at it and he's peeing. And then the phone rings and he sees it says it's his assistant. So he's peeing, doesn't care. He just taps answer. But it turns out she's testing FaceTime. So she FaceTimes him and he just auto answers. So now she sees him pissing. And he's like, ah! And then he throws his phone and she throws her phone and like the whole room is laughing, except for my Japanese client who looks like this. You know why? Because no photos are happening. And we're like talking and laughing and joking and talking about apps, and no photographs are happening, but everybody's having the best time. So at one point, Colin's like, that was a great story. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a great story, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, so who's the photographer? Because me and Corey were there, right? Just chilling. And I said, me? He's like, oh, great. Okay, cool. So what's the idea? And I'm like, oh, Mr. Firth, could you just sit here against this black background? He's like, okay. He sits down and I take this photo. And after this photo, Colin says, oh shit, you're a real photographer. I said, thank you, Colin. He's like, all right, this is going to be amazing. And then he gives me this photo, which is this smile. And I proceed to knock out what feels like 15 or 20 absolute showstoppers. This picture, which was the first one, this picture with a bit of a smile, and more. And those are the ones like my favorites that I just shared with you today, like those 4. But basically, afterwards, shake hands, blah, blah, blah. They do now. The client does the interview. The Japanese client does the interview, and he speaks for like 15 minutes. And then Colin, his entourage, leaves. The Japanese client comes straight to me, and he literally bowed and he said, oh, Mr. Cardi, you are so good. You are so good. I saw what you did. You're so tricky. He's like, you're so tricky. I was very scared. He says, I was very scared that you were not going to do the picture, but you tricked me because you made him so happy. And then you took the photo. And I said, yes. He's like, you're so good. You're so good. And for that experience, I got $5,000. $5,000 to hang out with Colin Firth for 20 minutes, talk for most of it, shoot for 5, and then and have not just a photo session that literally, by the way, a week later, he won an Oscar for An Innocent Man. So this now makes it so I have an Oscar winner in my portfolio, which is absolutely preposterous when you think about it. And what I want you to take from this today, what I want you to take from these sessions, first of all, I want you to also notice this was shot on Hasselblad, on Tri-X in 1997. I shot with Hasselblad from age 21 until age 34 as my main camera. This is Hasselblad film. Hasselblad film. This is Hasselblad film. I shot hip hop on Hasselblad. This is 35 millimeter film. And this is Hasselblad film. This is digital. And this is also shot on a camera that has 8 megapixels. 8 megapixels. I want you to look at this, and I'm going to say again, this is shot on a camera with 8 megapixels. So I also want you to remember, it's not about the camera. It's not about the equipment. But what it absolutely is about, if you're trying to be a portrait photographer, it's about the relationships. It's about the relationship between you and your subject. And what's even more important is this other third party that, as a photographer, we have no control over whatsoever. Do you know who that is? That's the viewer. We think that we have all the control, but in fact, our photographs aren't even about us. At the best, they are about our subjects. So the quicker that you remove your ego from your photography and really glorify who it is in front of your camera, that's the only time where you're truly going to master photography, is when you remove yourself from the equation, because it's not about you. It's not even about your subject. But what it is about is how the viewer feels when you share those photographs with them. The viewer is the one that we can't control. The viewer is the one that we don't know them. And our photographs can reach far distances that we can't even possibly imagine, all because of the viewer. So when we're making photographs, realize it isn't about us. It isn't about the subjects. It's definitely about the viewer and what you do with your subject in order to make them feel good enough that they can convey something real that will affect the viewer. You feeling it? You feeling that? Those are my I would say, my 3 most important sessions. And there are more. There will be more. I have a Michael Sheen session behind me. I photographed Michael Sheen for Hamlet. Michael Sheen literally cried on command. Did this, turned around, came back, different person. Like, I've never seen such a classically trained actor as Michael Sheen. But this is photography. This is photography. This is the power of the single image, the single subject, and the infinite possibilities that are the viewer. But it doesn't happen without you putting yourself out there. It doesn't happen without you breaking that wall and not just secretly taking street photographs from across the street. God damn it, this camera. Not just secretly taking street photographs from across the street, but going closer. Excuse me. I couldn't help but noticing how amazing the light is falling on your face when you're standing right there on your phone. I have taken a couple of pictures already. Would you mind if I show you? Oh my God, wow, those are great. I'm a photographer, but I'm really shy. It's taken me all my strength to cross the street and talk to you right now. Would you mind if I took some more photographs? Oh my God, of course you can. Oh my God, don't be so shy. These photographs are great. Sure, you can take my picture. What do you want me to do? Can you just go back to what you were doing on your phone? Of course. Now you've broken the 5th wall. And now you can say, hey, now can you just glance at me? And the girl's looking at her phone and now she just glances at the camera, and that becomes the photograph. That becomes the cover of your portfolio. That becomes the photograph that goes in the exhibit. That becomes the photograph that wins that contest, because you broke that 5th wall. You asked permission and you connected with someone. You told a story. You were honest. You were complimentary. And now you just won a Pulitzer because you shot that photograph. It comes from here, but it's hard, but you can do it. Guys, hope you're inspired. You know, this whole thing with the kind of crazy growth with my channel is kind of mental for me, honestly. Like, I posted a video the beginning of August called "The Best Advice That Nobody Listens to." And I took a risk with that video. I went out on my bike and I didn't have a camera, and I was just telling like, hey, these are some things that I've learned that like if I didn't know that these things, I wouldn't be at that level. And I decided to just deliver it in a completely different way. Like, let's introduce the fact that I love bikes so much. Like, let's introduce my bike life to my photography channel. So it was a risk. But what ended up happening is it flew. And in that video flying, all of a sudden, my channel went from 1.6 thousand followers to 11.8 thousand subscribers. Like 10,000 new subscribers in 60 days. I want you to wrap your head around that. 10,000 new subscribers in 60 days. So for me, like, I'm just trying to do the same thing, and I'm trying to help you, the emerging photographer, get to the next level. Hopefully you found me because you're trying to make make a little money with your camera and craft a little bit of a business with your life. Maybe you're trying to cross over from photography just being a side hustle to something that's actually helping you make a living, or actually making you a living, or actually to the point where you have money falling out of your goddamn pockets. You're buying R5s like they're going out of style, and you have a studio, lights, everything that you possibly need. All of that, understand that photography is a lifelong journey. It does not happen overnight, and it shouldn't. If it does, if your success happens overnight, you're not even ready. You're not even ready for it. You're not even ready to sustain it. Like, learning how to develop the work, learning how to develop the business, learning how to develop the marketing, and learning how to develop yourself. Like, those four things are a lifelong journey. Just when you master one, another one goes out of sync. As you're focusing on this one, your health goes out of sync. So your health, your work, your business, and your photography are things that it's four balls that, and that's just the four that I can think of during this live stream. But you're constantly juggling, and not a single one can fall out of step. If your health goes, you're screwed. Everything else falls down a hill. So if you're not taking your health seriously and you're trying to be a professional photographer, are you really serving yourself well? Take your health seriously. If you're not taking your work seriously, oh my God, if you're not actively shooting new work and trying to get those images, trying to continually put yourself outside of your comfort zone. Let me give you an example. If you feel stuck, how you get unstuck is by putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. Anytime you put yourself in a new place, it instantly unlocks creativity. How do you feel anytime that you get on a plane, fly somewhere, land, and then open your eyes? Suddenly, because everything around you is new and you don't see it every day, it instantly unlocks your creativity. Yes or yes, right? So that's putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. That's putting yourself into a new zone. So as a photographer, and if you don't have the dough to be jumping on planes and dipsy doodling all over the world, oh no, I'm getting time warped. If you don't have the time to dipsy doodle all over the world, we have to put ourselves outside our comfort zone in our own realm, in our own neighborhood. We have to continually like challenge ourselves in order to like rework our brain, rewire our brain to make ourselves feel that like creativity. That happens when you like put yourself outside it. You know, if you got a subway in your area, get on your subway. Go to the end of the line. Get out. Now you're in a new neighborhood and you're like, holy shit, everything. And now suddenly it unlocks creativity. Anytime that you put yourself somewhere new, it unlocks creativity. If you're feeling stuck, it means your eyes have been seeing the same things for too long. Guys, I hope today inspired you. I hope today inspired you as far as how important the relationships are that we develop with our photographs, with our subjects, particularly our subjects. By the way, develop zero emotional relationship with your photographs. When you're emotionally connected to your photographs, if someone doesn't like them, then it's like, oh, he doesn't like my photo. But if you just think of your photographs like your kids, where you put your best into it, and then once you release them out into the world, it's kind of like, hey, you don't like my kid, what can I do? They're their own person, you know? It's like you just let them go, you know? And then when you're critiqued on them, you can actually take that critique and it doesn't hurt your feelings. You're just like, oh my God, yeah, you're totally right. I'll do that next time. And then you do it next time, your work levels up, and you're not like hurt feelings because someone tells you something that you don't like about your photo. You know, the biggest problem I think with newer shooters is newer shooters don't know what they don't know. There's so much that newer shooters don't know that they can't possibly know what they don't know. And because they're in a situation that they don't know what they don't know, they think that they know. And then when they see an old guy like me with gray hair and is like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," they're like, what I gotta listen to this guy for? Because I know. Because they don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean? Which is totally cool because you're way smarter than that. My stuff resonates with you, which is why you're here watching. So we don't have to worry about them. But what we do need to do is level up. And that's what I'm trying to help you do. Guys, hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm ranting. I'm feeling good, though. I feel good about this new setup. I feel good about these new cameras. As you can see, we got the mirrorless here. And we got the mirrorless there. We got dual R50s. I went hard with my cameras. I got R50s. I mean, for you guys who know, like, I do shoot R5, you know? I do shoot R5, but I'm definitely not getting an R5 for my webcams, you know? But what I did notice is I was coming into some problems when I was making videos and I need to hold my R5. I was shooting them with iPhones. So now when I make it, and also, oh my God, now when I want to make a video, I can just push record and start going because I have two cameras. It's locked at my desk and I can just, it's dope. So expect even more videos. I dropped a video about 28 reasons why photographers stay poor. If you haven't watched that video, please watch it. It's #1 on my list right now. It's trending harder than the best advice that no one listens to, which means this video could get 250,000 views. If you haven't watched it, please do. It's got me 100 subs so far. I love you. Thank you. I'll see you soon. I appreciate you all. This commercial-free episode is brought to you by our members. You might have noticed that you just saw exactly 1 hour and 10 minutes of commercial-free content. I believe that commercials really disrupt the live streams, and I've turned memberships on. My members, all 82 of them, make it so you do not have to actually watch a single commercial if you watch this live. If you became a member recently, I'm showcasing you here right here. Junebug, Creative Works, Jessica Jean, Charles, Calligraphy, Sam. Everybody who's on this list are the people who became members in the last short while. If you subscribed within the last short while, you'll also see your name across the bottom. Understand that I make this content for you. There's no point of me in here talking to the air if it's not some of you, like you, getting information from it. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Consider becoming a member, and the commercials get turned on now.